Devotion.
Should be.
Are we ready? Good. Genesis 31. Long chapter. Read all of it last time. We will read all of it again. But we'll be considering mainly verses 22 through the end of the chapter, where we are. So, let's call for the bathroom. We're going to lock it. We're going to start locking it. Right, didn't I hear that, Scott? You and Jerry were saying it was going to be.
What's that? You can go on, we'll figure it out.
Okay. If you can get another minute or so, Jerry, it's okay.
Can't hear you.
It's on. Oh. It's just a red LED. Okay. Let's Adam, you.
Heavenly Father, we are very glad to be gathered together because of what your Son has accomplished on our behalf. We are doubly owned by you. You made us, and after rebelling, you purchased us with Christ's blood. And we pray that that would not be nothing, but that it would be everything. Lord, we come together on these Sunday mornings to build one another up, to encourage one another, to remind each other what your word says. And here now we sit before the preaching of your word. And it is your Holy Spirit who causes this word to go deep into our hearts. We pray that you would be at work this morning in our hearts to hear truth, and that we'd be molded by it, that we would come away from this meeting this morning different than when we came, more like Christ. We ask for your help, for Chad as he speaks with clarity, for us as we hear to have our ears open. Amen.
Well, again, if I'm giving a title, we would just say, Following God, Jacob exchanges Laban for Canaan. Right? Following God, Jacob exchanges Laban for Canaan. This is kind of part 2 of that. As So we consider the second part, I guess, it's more than the second half, but the second part of this Genesis chapter 31. We will take up the final back and forth between Jacob and Laban. Two very old men at this time, of unequal age. Laban's much older than Jacob, but who have found themselves quite angry with one another and doing what they can to position themselves in the, on top. For Jacob's part, and from his perspective, he has served Laban for more than 20 years, enduring from him every conceivable double-crossing. He's endured deeper and deeper lies and manipulation than we would have thought a man could dream up. There's nothing quite as shocking as waking up and finding you've been duped by your brand new father-in-law from the moment he became your father-in-law with the wrong bride. It's staggering, and it just goes downhill from there. It just doesn't get any better in terms of the way he's treated by Laban. Despite the treatment from Laban, Jacob has had the help of God and has come out very well ahead. He has done so well that he has worn out his welcome with Laban and his family, and he's now fearful for what sort of response they will make toward him. I didn't make a big deal of this, but it does come up in the bit today. He even says later in this portion today, he feared they might take away everything from him, even his wives and children. They would just take it all. When he went to ask to leave, I'm going to leave, and Laban would perhaps, because they were viewing him so unfavorably, just take everything from him and not even let him go with his wives at all. Strip him even of his family. For Laban's part, so that's Jacob's part in his perspective, but for Laban's part and from his perspective, he's frustrated and angry that no matter what he does, it seems that Jacob keeps coming out ahead. The more he tries to guarantee that things work out for himself and for his sons, they still work out better for Jacob. He hasn't caught him in anything, but it seems like something must be happening, right? It's this feeling he has to have. He now has almost nothing left of the increase in his wealth that Jacob had first brought to him those first 14 years of his service. I mean, things were great. And all of a sudden, now that Jacob has a stake in things, Laban can't win for losing. And so, anyway, so 20 years of building wealth is gone, or 14 years of building wealth is gone in 6, and now in the hands of another, despite his every effort to stop it. Not only is he upset, but his sons also have grown frustrated and sour toward Jacob. Now, in addition to those details we talked about last time, in Jacob's mind is also his fear of Esau and the revenge his brother has been seeking, which is waiting for him in Canaan. It was 20 years ago that he fled from Esau with the promise from his mother that she would send word to him when it's safe to return. And he's never heard anything. She's never sent word. And so there were two fearful situations for Jacob. First was the fear of retaliation and theft or violence from Laban's family. And second was the fear of death if met by his brother back home in Canaan. Where was he to go? Well, into this situation, God appears to him in a dream and gives him direction. He explains to Jacob that God had been directly involved in protecting him from Laban all the way up until now, and has been deliberately blessing Jacob in spite of Laban's underhanded ways. So he explains to him that, look, I've been looking out for you all this time. Then he encourages him to return to the land of Canaan by promising him, if he will go, that God will again be with him to protect him in Canaan. But more than that, God also commands him to return, reminding Jacob of his sworn oath made to God at Bethel, to return and to worship God and to establish a shrine for the worship of God in the land of Canaan. Jacob promised that. And so those things happen in that dream. Jacob responds to the dream by calling on his wives and explaining to them why he wants to move back to Canaan and why now. And then also explaining about the vision he had in a dream from God. They respond to him willingly, wanting to follow him to Canaan, and they express a lack of any confidence they have in the kind intentions their father Laban might have in dealing with them. There's nothing for them there. They are, as it were, without a family, only with Jacob. And so they all leave immediately.
stealing away as quickly as possible while Laban was away and unable to say goodbye, or even to know about it until days later. Laban was angered. He pursued Jacob with bad intentions. Just before he caught up with Jacob, God met him in a vision and warned Laban not to harm Jacob and not to dissuade him from going to Canaan. And that's the scene that we enter into today as we consider kind of starting up in verse 22 in this study of the chapter. But just by way of summarizing, so we're well equipped to understand the rest of things here, let me say a few things by way of summary. And what follows here, the first thing we have is Laban pursues Jacob as a man in war, seeking his revenge. Second, having been put off his vengeance by God, Laban seeks to win in something of a judicial encounter against Jacob, to bring a charge against him in front of all the family, all of his kinsmen, to bring a charge. But Jacob flips the script, defends himself successfully, and then makes a charge of his own, a counterclaim against Laban in front of everyone. Third, Jacob and Laban then, after it's all discussed, agree to terms of peace at Gilead and the terms are that they will generally just stay apart, but most importantly, they won't approach one another for harmful purposes. I won't pass this stone on your side to harm you, and you won't pass it to harm me. Right? So we have our places where you live up there and I live over here, but if we happen to venture past, it won't be to harm the other person. Agreed? Seems like a kind of a minimal peace treaty, right? It's a place to start, at least. So you have this. And then the last thing that happens in the chapter is Laban then returns back to Paddan Aram in peace. So those kind of four things that are remaining for us to discuss. So that provides us, I think, with the basic idea of how things proceed. So with that, then, let's read through the passage and get this all in front of us here. Verse 1 of chapter 31. Now Jacob heard that the sons of Laban were saying, Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from what was our father's, he's gained all his wealth. And Jacob saw that Laban did not regard him with favor as before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your kindred, and I will be with you. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah into the field where his flock was, and said to them, I see that your father does not regard me with favor as he did before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. But God did not permit him to harm me. If he said, the spotted shall be your wages, then all the flock bore spotted. And if he said, the striped shall be your wages, then all the flock bore striped. Thus God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. Now in the breeding season of the flock, I lifted up my eyes and saw in a dream that the goats that mated with the flock were striped, spotted, and mottled. And then the angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob, and I said, here I am. And he said, lift up your eyes and see, all the goats that mate with the flock are striped, spotted, and mottled. For I have seen that all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and made a vow to me. Now arise, go out from this land and return to the land of your kindred. And then Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, is there any portion or inheritance left to us in our father's house? Are we not regarded by him as foreigners? For he has sold us and has indeed devoured our money. All the wealth that God has taken away from our father belongs to us and to our children. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do. So Jacob arose and set his sons and his wives on camels. He drove away all his livestock, all his property that he had gained, the livestock in his possession that he had acquired in Paddan Aram, to go to the land of Canaan to his father Isaac. Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel stole her father's household gods, and Jacob it says tricked, or better, I think, translation here, stole the heart of Laban the Aramean by not telling him that he intended to flee. He fled with all that he had, and arose and crossed the Euphrates, and set his face toward the hill country of Gilead. When it was told Laban on the third day that Jacob had fled, he took his kinsman with him and pursued him for 7 days and followed close after him into the hill country of Gilead. But God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream by night and said to him, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. And Laban overtook Jacob. Now, Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country, and Laban with his kinsmen pitched tents in the hill country of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done? That you have tricked me, or have stolen my heart, and driven away my daughters like captives of the sword? Why did you flee secretly and steal my heart, and did not tell me, so that I might have sent you away with myrrh and songs, with tambourine and lyre? And why did you not permit me to kiss my sons and my daughters farewell? Now you have done foolishly. It is in my power to do you harm. But the God of your father spoke to me, but the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. And now you have gone away, because you have longed greatly for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods?" Jacob answered and said to Laban, "Because I was afraid, for I thought that you would take your daughters from me by force. Anyone with whom you find your gods shall not live. In the presence of our kinsmen, point out what I have that is yours and take it." Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. So Laban went into Jacob's tent, and into Leah's tent, and into the tent of the two female servants, but he did not find them. And he went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them in the camel's saddle and sat on them. Laban felt all about the tent, but did not find them. And she said to her father, "Let not my lord be angry that I cannot rise before you, for the way of women is upon me." So he searched, but did not find the household gods. Then Jacob became angry and berated Laban. And Jacob said to Laban, "What is my offense? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? For you have felt through all my goods. What have you found of all your household goods? Set it here before my kinsmen and your kinsmen, that they may decide between us two. These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried, and I have not eaten the rams of your flocks. What was torn by wild beasts I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it myself. From my hand you required it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. And there I was. By day the heat consumed me, and the cold by night, and my sleep fled from my eyes. These 20 years I have been in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock, and you changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been on my side, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God saw my affliction and the labor of my hands, and rebuked you last night." And then Laban answered and said to Jacob, "The daughters are my daughters. The children are my children. The flocks are my flocks. And all that you see is mine. But what can I do this day for these my daughters, or for their children whom they have borne? Come now, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me." So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. And Jacob said to his kinsmen, "Gather stones." And they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jegar Sahadutha, but Jacob called it Galeed. Laban said, "This heap," which in both languages, Aramean and Hebrew, means witness, right? Heap of witness. Laban said, "This heap is a witness between you and me today." Therefore he named it Galeed and Mizpah. For he said, "The Lord watch between you and me when we are out of one another's sight. If you oppress my daughters, or if you take wives besides my daughters, although no one is with us, see, God is witness between you and me." And then Laban said to Jacob, "See this heap and the pillar which I have set between you and me? This heap is a witness, and the pillar is a witness, that I will not pass over this heap to you, and you will not pass over this heap and this pillar to me, to do harm. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us." So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. And Jacob offered a sacrifice in the hill country and called his kinsmen to eat bread. They ate bread and spent the night in the hill country. Early in the morning, Laban arose and kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned home. Okay. Well, let's just begin to look at this under the headings of those four things I said that happened in the text. So first of all, Laban pursues Jacob as a man in war seeking his revenge. If you look at the words used in verses 23, 24, and 25, well, really 23 and 25, these words that are used are deliberately descriptive of a warlike effort, warlike endeavor. You remember before when Moses described the way that Jacob fled from Laban earlier in the chapter? He described it with words indicating that Jacob stole away. He drove off his possessions. He quickly fled away from Laban. He stole Laban's heart by not telling Laban. Moses expects us, when he uses those words, to understand from that language that Jacob should have done different. It wasn't right. And that's one of the very things that Laban goes with his kinsman to go and accuse Jacob of, is the way that he left. He robbed him as a father. I mean, he would like to be able to do this, to say goodbye to his daughters, to rejoice over their departure, he talks about. Jacob should have done different. We're supposed to get that his migration to Canaan was something like a thief making a getaway. Yes, it was obedience to God, but he could have obeyed God in a way that wasn't dishonoring, perhaps, to Laban. He should have said something and looked for God to protect him, but he didn't. He just took off. And that's one of Laban's chief complaints. But also in these verses, 23 and 25, we read the following phrases to describe Laban's actions, and I'm saying they're militaristic. Listen to these phrases. He took his kinsman with him and pursued him. Another phrase, and followed close after him. Another one, and Laban overtook Jacob. Now those, I think we all hear those and think, oh, I can see how that could be kind of like a military thing. It's the same word used when you get up and chase somebody that was used of Abram when he went and pursued the people who captured Lot, those armies who captured Lot. Abraham went and gathered his associates together and went and pursued. This is the same word. These phrases are all used elsewhere in the Bible, almost exclusively, at least this first one, in war and justice situations. Again, Abram pursued the armies who took Lot captive. Egypt pursued Israel after they left Egypt. They pursued them out in the wilderness to go get them and hunt them down and bring them back. And in Israel, an avenger of a murder pursues the killer in search of their vengeance. Those cities of refuge were meant to provide a way that you could, right, if you were fleeing from somebody who was pursuing you in this way, the same way Laban is pursuing Jacob, you could get somewhere safe before you tired out. That was the whole thing. The idea was, you're going to run for your life, but this guy's running with a heart set on killing you, and he might catch you before you tire out. So we're going to set up several cities where you can go and, right, you can cling to a place and be protected until all the matters sorted out legally. And that was the whole point. And so this pursuit, it's a dangerous thing. Laban sets out, gathers up all his kinsmen, and pursues. Remember that he had a 3-day, Jacob had a 3-day head start. And in 7 days, Laban catches him. I mean, Jacob was hauling already, as fast as he could get everybody to move. He had a lot he was taking with him, but they were moving. They weren't stopping for things. Right? Till they got to Gilead, they set up camp. And by the time they get there, 7 days later, Laban's already caught them. You have a 3 days head start, and it only lasts 7 days total. You're being pursued pretty hotly. Now, another example of that, let me just say, I think I've got it, I might have brought it up later in my notes, but I just want to say it here. I think it makes better sense to bring this out. It's a little over 300 miles, the journey. And he did it in 7 days. He got there in 7 days. Loaded up his camels and took off. And I mean, camels only go so fast, right? When I'm looking online, like racing camels, I can't know there's a thing, go like 100 miles in a day. That's if like you're on a track and you're racing your camel. I don't know what that looks like, but that's what that is, right? Like 100 miles, the most they could go in a day, right? Most of these camels, 40, 50 miles, that's it. And they say, I mean, a horse is way faster than a camel. They say, like, the horse, like if it goes 50 miles in a day, like a good in-shape trail horse, that's like all you're getting. 50 miles, like you need to give it a rest. So for 7 days, I mean, they're averaging, and they would go, if they went 50 miles a day, it would have taken them 6 days. It only took them 7 days, and they caught them. So they were hauling, right? These men they're not just kind of eventually going to find out where Jacob settled and visit. They're coming to stop him. They mean to do him harm, to take back what's theirs because this thief, Jacob, stole it away. And they mean business. This word that's translated as to follow close after in the ESV. So he pursued him for 7 days and followed close after him into the hill country of Gilead. That's the same word used in Genesis 2 for the way a man is to cleave to his wife. Right? It's the same word. It does not necessarily have a negative meaning at all. It always has but it always has with it this active, energetic, serious, determined idea of attaching yourself to something and holding on for good. Like this is yours. You mean to grab it and take it. Keep it with you. In the context of vengeance or war, it's used to describe many times this hot pursuit. It's like you're pursuing them and now you've got them in sight and you close the gap and you take over. You overtake them, which is what happens next. He overtakes Jacob. It's a determined tracking down of your enemy. Now that they're in sight, you refuse to let them get away. The pursuit increases all the more. Followed close after him. In Judges chapter 20, verse 45, I'll read this. And they turned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon. 5,000 men of them were cut down on the highways, and they were pursued hard, that's that word, pursued hard to get him. And 2,000 men of them were struck down. So you got this battle. You already killed 5,000 of them. Some of them get away, and it's like, we're not going to let them get away either. And you go and you kill another 2,000 of them. It's that's what is happening here. He's pursuing him. He gets close. He comes up. He's determined he's going to get him. At that time, when Jacob is nearly in striking distance, God intervenes and warns Laban. Right? It's amazing. The other word used in verse 25, overtook, is used many times in this setting as well. Let me just read one of them from Exodus 15, verse 9. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake. That's that word, I will overtake. I will divide the spoil. My desire shall have its fill of them. I will draw my sword, and my hand shall destroy them. You see the progression. I will pursue, I'll overtake. When you overtake, what happens? What's left to be done then? Well, divide the spoil. You're done. The overtaking it's the conquering. It's the invasion of the camp. It's the invasion of the city. Right? That's the actual time of battle. Verse 25, and Laban overtook Jacob. He's there. It's a frightening thing. Now, he pursues him, he says, as far as the hill country of Gilead. Now, the hill country of Gilead, I said before, was kind of this bordering edge between the two lands. And it really, you ought to think of it, now it's near what commonly people talk about in the news today is like the Golan Heights. That's kind of the area we're talking about, if you know exactly where that's at. But this is the place where, you remember when Israel went into the Promised Land this way? And some of the tribes, half tribe of Manasseh and the tribe of Gad and Reuben as well, wanted to kind of stay out here on the edge and not enter the Promised Land. This is what we're talking about. This is the land. So in the hill country of Gilead, this is where they are, kind of the northern part of that. And it's kind of this border area. Both Aramaean and Hebrew would have been spoken there. And that's why these monuments, these altars are given these both names, a name from both languages. So here they are. This is where we are geographically. Laban took 7 days with a hotly pursuing band of men to catch Jacob. But God intervenes. Right again, as things are intense and Laban is near to catching his prey, God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream by night and said to him, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Right? This is verse 24. Be careful not to say anything to him, either good or bad. What's happening? He's warning him, essentially. You might look at this and think, well, he totally disregarded what God said. Because he got there and said, Jacob, You've done all this stuff you should. That sounds pretty bad. But the idea is, don't dissuade him from his course. Don't interfere. So God's telling him, let him alone. So he goes there, and he's got plenty to say, but he's not, in this sense, saying anything good or bad. He's not telling him, you have to come back, or don't go. He's not attacking him. He's not stopping this migration in any way. Right? So he's changed his purpose. He was there to do him harm, and God says, don't you say a thing to him. You leave him be. Don't lay a hand on him. He's my man. I'm warning you. Hands off. Right? Don't speak to him good or ill. Well, he obviously speaks to him in a negative way, but it's not the way that it would have been. It's the kind of thing, it's this way. Laban comes there and lists all these charges and says, now, it's in my power to do you harm. But God said not to, and I won't. You see, that's what we mean. Like the bad thing to say would be like, now, meet your end, kind of, this is the idea. It doesn't take it to that level. And so, anyway, this is, God intervenes for Jacob. What a thing. So Laban still pursues him the rest of the way. Laban's out there seeking to save his reputation and at least win a judgment and save face before his relatives in his house and the men who are with him. And also, we learn, he's out there to recover his stolen gods, right? He wants to get his gods back, right? He needs them, right? They've been stolen from him. So he overtakes them in the hill country of Gilead. And this is curious. Imagine being Jacob, or in Jacob's camp. It says, and Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country. So they're out there, kind of the hilly, you can kind of see it's someone, you see someone approaching. It takes a while for them to get there. There's lots of hills and stuff, so you maybe have some time. Maybe you can defend yourselves a little better. They've made it to that point. They're in a good spot. And here comes Laban with all these men. There's not really a whole lot you can do about it. You can't really get away. These men have been gaining on you all this time. And here they are. And they come and they set up their tents. They don't attack. They just set up their tents. You talk about awkward, right? You've been in a room sometime, maybe there's some problem and they come in and it's like, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to say. This is strange, right? You start smelling their fires, what they're cooking at night, they're laughing at camp, or they're talking, you kind of what are they saying? And what are their plans? You don't know. This isn't good. It would be a very strange night the rest of the evening, for sure, when they come and set up their tents. But all that gets done, and then probably it's the next day. Laban said to Jacob, right? He begins to speak to him. Now, so Laban no longer intends to bring harm to Jacob, but this isn't necessarily a good thing for Jacob. It's better than being attacked, but what's going to come now? So now begins this very interesting section in which Laban seeks to win a judicial encounter against Jacob. He's not looking for some judge to preside. Laban's coming as the patriarch of the family. Like he could render judgment, but if it's just him and someone else, it's kind of a dispute, a personal dispute. But all the kinsmen are there, and he means to make his case before them and for them to make a decision, in a sense, right? Now, they would have to have a lot of evidence to kind of go against him, but he's kind of there with his support, him and his gang, and imagine if, someone comes to you with, put it this way, it's like we have, we put things in politics before the Senate. The Senate is mostly Republican right now, more than Democrats, so they kind of have control. And if you were to ask a Democrat, well, let's let the U.S. Senate decide this thing, and it's some political thing divided between Republicans and Democrats, they'd say, no. Well, why not? Well, because there's more Republicans. It's not, they're just going to side with you, right? And vice versa, if there were more Democrats, they'd say, well, no, they're going to, like in the House, right? That's why right now in the House, it's only Democrat ideas that get passed. And then the Senate, it's only Republican ideas that get passed. Because I'm with this group and you're with that group. And that's kind of the way it goes. Well, here comes Laban with all of his kinsmen. They're all ready to kill Jacob. They're warned not to. And now it's like, well, let's have a tribunal. Let's have this stuff out in front of everybody and air out our grievances. And, we'll see. I'm in the right. And it's like, good luck, Jacob. Like, you're not going to win the argument. It's just over. And so Laban's very confident. And Laban puts a huge spin on everything that he says. It's crazy. He's angling hard to save face in light of all these things. I mean, remember, God has just come and told him, leave him alone. And Jacob interprets that later as God has rebuked you for the way you've treated me. There's no way that God rebuked Laban for the way Laban was treating Jacob, and Laban didn't feel any of that. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, leave this guy alone. Okay, I'm not sure why, but that's fine. I won't kill him. I mean, there's a sense in which he's got to know. His conscience has got to be pained here. So, here we are. He says, what is this that you have done? Right? What have you done? He's kind of calling him to account. And he says that you have tricked me or stolen away my heart, and driven away my daughters like captives of the sword. Now let's look at that. What might that look like? To drive away a man's daughters like captives of the sword. Let me ask you, when you envision that, do you envision a man sending for his own wives to come out and meet him in the field and have a discussion about what they plan to do, getting their consent and agreement, him receiving from them their affirmation, yes, this is good, we want to go, we have nothing here, let's leave. These are not the same things at all. Like, Laban is grossly in error here. And to describe it this way is terribly unfair. Now, it's possible he's so ignorant of his own, the way people perceive him and think about him, that maybe he thinks that they would have chosen him, but because Jacob did this, they've gone off. I mean, pride does that, right? It totally tricks you about what people think of you, about how important you are to them, about how kind you have or haven't been to them. Pride does that. It distorts reality. It's very possible Laban genuinely feels that this is true. Very possible. Why did you flee secretly and steal my heart away and did not tell me, so that I might have sent you away with mirth and songs and tambourine and lyre? Now, this is incredible. This is Laban talking. You remember what happened the last time Jacob said, let me have your daughters and let me go? What happened? Laban said, sorry, man. I want you to stay. Name your wages. This has been a good deal. Like, I'll pay you whatever you want. Let's do that. And he didn't even honor that. The idea that if Jacob had just approached Laban with this request, that Laban would have responded with joy and mirth and tambourine and lyres and song is ridiculous. Like, everyone who knows Laban is saying, come on, like, that's not the Laban I know. I mean, he might have gone maybe a step further than last time, but like something would have been, something had to have been done. Now, I think you and I would probably say he probably would have, at best, have told Jacob, well, what would you give me for my daughters if you need to leave? It's like, well, how about 14 years of service? What do you mean? How about 6 years of this flock? And he'd say, yes, and now you have the flock, and now you're free to purchase them. Give me the flock, and you can take them. Something like that. Now, Jacob was afraid he wouldn't even get that because things had gotten so hostile, right? It wasn't just like, I've got a father-in-law who's just not a nice guy. I've got a family and in-laws who really want to do me harm. They're sick of me being here. They want to change things. They're not happy the way things have turned out. And he's afraid to go to them. But anyway, so here it is. He says, and why did you not permit me to kiss my sons and my daughters farewell? Now you have done foolishly, right? So he charged him just with being a fool on top of everything else. Which in that culture is like the ultimate dig, like you've said all these things and then you say on top of it, and to top it off, you've acted like a complete fool, right? You've done foolishly. It is in my power to do you harm. Now, my ESV says later, but the God of your father, and the your is plural. But really it's the you in this whole verse here is plural. What Laban is saying, and this is staggering, it's in my power to do all of you harm. I could kill you all. He sees this as an incredible offense, as theft. The way he's described this as driving them away like captives of the sword, he means for people to hear that language and be incensed against Jacob and want to put him to death. And evidently he was successful because they've all come out to do that. This is how they were. It's in my power to do you harm. But the God of your father, that God that you serve, that God, spoke to me last night saying, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. So he finishes the charge. And he says, now look, you've gone away because you long greatly for your father's house. Which, that's the way Laban views it. But why did you steal my gods? Now let's stop there. There are two charges he's leveled. Right? First charge. What have you done that you stole away my heart and drove my daughters away like captives of the sword? Second charge, and you stole my gods. Jacob answers them in that order. It's very helpful for us to understand he doesn't begin answering about stealing the gods. He begins his answer with the first charge. Why did I take the daughters the way I did? Verse 31. Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid, for I thought that you would take your daughters from me by force. Right? Take them in this way by force. Now, in this second charge that's given. Verse 32, so that's his explanation for the first. I was afraid. That's why. He doesn't give them all the details, but he says, look, I was afraid this is what you would do to me. Now you imagine Laban might say, oh no, I would never do that. I was going to celebrate it. Right? That's what he's wanting to say. But then for the second charge, anyone with whom you find your God shall not live. He doesn't dispute whether maybe they've been stolen. He says, look, if somebody stole them, they're dead. In the presence of our kinsmen, point out anything that I have that's yours and take it. But Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. And you can just see the tension. I mean, it's like, oh no, Rachel's the one he loves, right? I mean, like, we've got to the end of things, and we still haven't heard that he really cares for Leah. And then he's got these two concubines that are these servants that have fathered children for his other two wives. And it's Rachel that he loves. It's Rachel who had this son. He said, that's the reason 6 years ago he decided, I need to go home. I've got my boy. And now Rachel, out of pettiness, perhaps, or out of fear and just wanting to have everything, all the gods she could have, has stolen these gods, and now her life's in danger. She could die. So, Laban went, we're talking about the second charge, have you stolen the gods? Laban went into Jacob's tent, and into Leah's tent, and into the tent of the two female servants, but he did not find them. And he went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them in the camel's saddle. So she was riding on a camel on a saddle, right? This is how she was traveling. Not sure what the saddle was like exactly, but now that they're camping, she's taken the saddle off the camel, which you would do to give the camel rest. She's put it in her tent, and she's sitting on it. So it must be fairly comfortable. She's sitting on it, lying on it, whatever she's doing. She's on the camel's saddle. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them in the camel's saddle and sat on them. So the saddle has some kind of pouch or something she could put it in, right? Very likely that's the case. Laban felt all about the tent, but did not find them. He felt all about the tent. There's another time we've read about some old man feeling around and being tricked. Jacob was involved. You remember, he put this skin on, and his father, who was blind, was feeling around and was deceived. I don't know if there's a practical lesson there about not just feeling for things or what, look a little more diligently. I don't know. But twice now this has happened. It's the same word used. feeling around. It's quite a thing. So unknowingly, Jacob has put Rachel's life in danger, and now we find Laban in the tent where the idols are, searching around. And I would just say, like, if you were watching this scene, if you were there in person, if you were Rachel, you'd be terrified. If you're Jacob, you'd just be indignant. If you're Laban, you're desperate. If you were someone who had seen Rachel do this and pack them away, you would be scared to death about what may happen. And so, because Moses has given us this information ahead of time and told us she's got these idols, she's done this, we should be terrified. We should read this and think, oh no, what's going to happen? Not just, it's turned out, I remember that, he was tricked. Like, this is terrifying. Jacob had just said, Laban's came out here out for blood with these men. He's been thwarted by God, and now Jacob has given him permission. Whoever has the idols, you can execute them. And I'm with it. I'm all for that. You can imagine the predicament he'd been in if Laban finds the idols with Rachel. What's going to happen? He's going to have to kill her. Or Laban's going to be merciful. And it doesn't seem like that's kind of really the way Laban is. So this is not a good thing. It's terrifying. So he's searching around, touching, feeling, patting with his hands. And then what does she say? So Laban felt all about the tent, but did not find them. There's one place left to look. She's on the saddlebag, right? And she said to her father, Let not my Lord be angry that I cannot rise before you, for the way of women is upon me. So she tells him, and he's like, so what did he do? All right, and he just leaves. It's like done. He searched, but he didn't find him. He's very frustrated. He knows somebody stole his gods, but he can't find them here. Can't prove anything. Maybe somebody else has them, but it's probably here, but he can't find them. He doesn't know what happened to them, but they're not here. Very frustrating. So it's an interesting thing. The way of women. What are we talking about? Well, likely menstruation, right? Likely that's what we're talking about. If that's the case, think of this for a moment. In Israel, you've got if a woman is in this, if the way of women is with her, it's like whatever she touches in Israel, it's unclean. Now think of this. She has what she is touching, what she's on, what she's bleeding on, is her father's household gods. It's like the ultimate insult to a pagan deity, to this household god that you bow down before. Your daughter is bleeding all over this thing in her time of uncleanness. It's like, what in the world? This is crazy. And I think Laban probably doesn't look because he probably thinks, well, no one would do that. That's like the ultimate insult. You wouldn't do that. So he doesn't even bother to look. He has no interest in rummaging through there, and he just thinks, well, there's no way the gods are there, and he goes on. He knows she's on a saddle. He can see that. He knows there's bags, there's pockets in the saddle. He can see that. He knows the size of his household gods. They can fit in there. But he doesn't even bother to look. No one would do that. She did. So this is part of what makes me think maybe part of this was also spite. So she claims this. Perhaps she was on the way women was with her. Perhaps that's a reality. Perhaps it's just a lie that she made up, right? She may have just hid them there and this is convenient because this is happening to me. I know he won't look. Or my whole thing may have been a lie. Also, some people say, and I tend to disagree with this because of the timing of things, but some people say the way of women might be that she's pregnant. And it's like she's pregnant to the extent that it's hard for her to get up and she's taking a rest and he just leaves her be. I don't think that's as likely. I think what we always read this as is the way to understand it. But so, this is where we are. So she probably lies about it, but maybe she doesn't. But either way, she's lying about it in terms of she's hiding it from him, right? She still stole these things. That's still wrong. She's covering up her theft. She might be lying on. She's definitely lying. She might be lying in more ways than one. So This is it. So he searched but did not find the household gods. So now Jacob became angry and berated Laban. Jacob said to Laban, and you can, I tried not to shout when I did this, but at least to read it louder, because, this would, if I told you someone was angry and berated them, you would understand that there's shouting going on. This is what an angry, berating person looks like. When you berate someone, it's not just, writing out your grievances. You are forcefully speaking to them. And Jacob said to Laban, what is my offense? Right? So you've searched everything. Tell me, what is it? Right? What's my sin that you've so hotly pursued me all this way? We left 10 days ago. 7 days ago you left, and you've come all the way this way, ready to do what? For what, Laban? Right? This is the idea. You felt through everything. You invaded all of our privacy. You went through all of our stuff, and you got nothing. I told you, whatever was yours, take it out here, and we'll answer for it. What have you found? Lay it out here. You've got nothing, Laban. This is the idea. He's upset, very angry. For you have felt through all my goods. You have found, what have you found of all your household goods? Set it here before my kinsmen and your kinsmen. So now Jacob is angling in. Look, he doesn't have all his family here. Jacob has his own personal descendants here and his wives, but he doesn't have like all these kinsmen, all these people. He's got servants and things, people that are with him. Possibly what it means by kinsmen, but it's probable that Jacob is referring to his own people and some of the people who were with Laban and saying, set it before my kinsmen and your kinsmen. Set it before them. That they may decide between us two. So Jacob's saying, yeah, let them decide. Let's see who's in the right. I've submitted to you. I've allowed you to do all the things. I've answered your questions, and you've got nothing. You've made your search. There's no fault found in our camp. I've not wronged you in any way. And now he charges Laban for all these 20 years. These 20 years I've been with you, right? Your ewes and your female goats have not missed. He recounts all the way he served him, the faithfulness with which he served him, for two purposes. One, to put on record his own faithfulness, but two, to show how unreasonable it is for Laban to be accusing him now. Right? For 20 years I served you faithfully. Why would you assume that I drove off your daughters like captives from war? This isn't the way it was. It's never been that way. Notice there might be some growing sensitivity in Jacob toward Leah. He does not mention that he was duped and lied to about what wife he would marry. When he mentions all of Laban's faults, he doesn't mention that. And he sure could have. But you can imagine, Leah, it'd be horrible. And you stuck me with this one. Poor Leah. She knew that anyway. She knew he felt that way. He didn't have to say it. He didn't, right? Maybe he's beginning to honor her a little more now. Possible. Very possible. We don't know, but it's possible. He doesn't, at least at this stage, he doesn't count his marriage to Leah as a wrong done to him by his father-in-law. Now, it's possible that it's one of the 10 times his wages were changed or something like that. I don't know. But again, I think that 10 times is just a number that just meant to signify a lot. It might have been 20. It might have been 10. It might have been 7. I don't know. 10 times. So let's skip down to verse 41. These 20 years I have been in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times. This is the counter charge. And then kind of comes the kicker. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac, he describes him that way. Right? He's not one of your household gods that you were looking for. We don't serve the same God. If the God of my father, that's Isaac, the God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac had not been on my side. So we've got two sides in this dispute. God's on, what side has God been on? My side. We're disagreeing on this. God's been on my side the whole time. And if he hadn't been, you, now, even now, surely now, you would have sent me away empty-handed. You wouldn't have done what, he's calling him a liar. You would not have, let's song and tambourine and lyre and let's kiss. Like, that's not the way this is going to happen. You would have sent me away with nothing. And God knows it, and I know it. But God intervened. And God saw my affliction. He saw the labor of my hands, the way I had served you, and He rebuked you last night. That's profound. He's speaking as a man with authority. He's not pleading for them to judge. He's saying God has judged and you've been found guilty. And God rebuked you. You would have done far worse if it weren't for God. You're on the wrong side of things, Laban, and you've been on the wrong side of things for 20 years. This is profound. Like, Laban's there with all of his kinsmen, right? This isn't a private rebuke. This is the kind of thing that gets you killed. Like, you say this to a king, you're a dead man. Right? Laban's come out there to do them harm. That tells me that Laban, for all of his idolatry, had some fear of God. Like, he was a pagan enough, he was a religious enough man to know that when a God appears to you and you know that God has appeared, that whatever that God may be, you don't disobey. And he knows that this is the same God who's been blessing him before, who's been doing these sorts of things, and now that God says, don't you touch him, and so he doesn't. He refuses. But Jacob certainly had his say here. It's incredible. I mean, he just reads Laban the act. I mean, he rips him up one side, down the other. Jacob became angry and berated Laban, and that is exactly what he did. He didn't even, as I said, he didn't even mention some of the grossest ways, that is the biggest ways, that Laban wronged him. He could have he could have said things worse. God saw my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you last night. So, that's the second part of this second half here. Now then, Laban has to leave off his charges. He's humiliated. Jacob brings the counterclaim, states his case. And now we come to terms of peace. Laban answers him and said to Jacob. And now he begins to angle himself again in the sight of everyone as the benevolent one, the kind one. Think of this. I mean, the daughters were his before he gave them away. The grandchildren were never really his. The flocks were his before when they agreed on what the terms would be. And Jacob worked for his own flock. This is not Laban's flock anymore. But listen to the way Laban characterizes it to make himself look so generous here. The daughters are my daughters. The children are my children. Let me stop for a moment. It was custom at the time. I haven't mentioned this yet, but everything that I read and I gather, and you can search this out yourself if you want to, it seems to be customary at the time. It was the law in Israel even, that you could have a servant who has children in your house, and the children are not counted as belonging to the slave necessarily. Does that make sense? Now, if it was an Israelite, they belonged to that Israelite. If they were married or whatever, there were certain rules about that. But if it was just a servant and they had children, like the children are your servants too. So it would be a stretch for Laban to do this, but you could imagine kind of culturally how you could kind of make this case. Like, I know you had married them, you'd served to have them as daughters and stuff, but look, they were still my daughters. These are my grandchildren. They belong to me. That would violate all the terms of their agreements before, but you could imagine a guy talking this way if the situation were a little bit different. And so it's a stretch, it's an exaggeration, it's not really true, but he speaks this way, and you could imagine some of his kinsmen maybe saying, we know situations like this. So the daughters are my daughters, the children are my children, the flocks are my flocks. All that you see, everything out here is mine. But what's a proud dad to do for his daughters? Right? This is the idea. What's a father to do for his lovely daughters who he cherishes so much? But to do what? What father has given such a gift to his daughters and set them on their way? Nobody like Laban. There's nobody like him. He's a great guy, right? This is the idea. It's crazy. But what can I do this day for these, my daughters, or for their children, whom they have borne? Come now, let us make a covenant, you and I. Let it be. And so the whole thing is like, I'm going to let you have it all. And, right? It's crazy. And listen to the way he keeps going. And let it be a witness between you and me. So Jacob took a stone, and set it up as a pillar. And Jacob said to his kinsmen, gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there by the heap. So they say, okay, we're going to make peace here. And so there's always, when that happens in these cultures, you have a covenant meal. And so they have one. Israel had one. The elders of Israel had one with God on the mountain. Right? You always have a covenant meal. The Lord himself had that Last Supper, right? When he cut that new covenant and told them what was happening. This is this covenant meal. And we will one day eat with him again at table. I mean, this is what we're talking about. This is common language, and it happens all the time. So they agree to have a meal. And they eat there. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar, and Jacob said to his kinsmen, gather stones, and they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jegar Sahudutha, right, which means what? In Aramaic, heap of witness. That's the language he spoke from Padan Aram, Aramea. He speaks Aramaic, calls it this. But Jacob called it Galid, which in Hebrew means heap of witness. They both give the same name, but it's in two languages. They might have even written on it each in their language, something like that. Now, Laban said, so now Laban, he's going to set the terms. This heap is a witness between you and me today. Therefore he named it Galid and Mizpah, which means watch post. So he kind of gave both names. It's a witness and it's a way to watch. He says, the Lord watched between you and me when we are out of one another's sight. If you will press my daughters, like this is kind of a father giving his daughters away, and he's saying, look, you're going to take them, and you had better be good to them. What's the standard, Laban? The way you treated them? You got to treat them that well? You know, it's a pretty low bar, but he's trying to save face. He's couching everything in this way that makes him look so good. The Lord watched between you and me when we are out of one another's sight. If you oppress my daughters, or if you take wives besides my daughters, although no one is with us, see, God is witness between you and me. And then Laban said to Jacob, see this heap and the pillar, which I have set between you and me, which he had, Jacob had done, and Jacob had said to his kinsmen to do. It's just great. I mean, he's kind of setting himself up as the benefactor here. Everyone's receiving from his good graces. This heap is a witness, and the pillar is a witness, that I will not pass over this heap to do to you. Now listen, he says, I won't pass over this heap to you, and you, Jacob, won't pass over the heap to me to do me harm. What? Because Jacob's what? Been harming you all this time? What are you talking about? So it's amazing that even though the covenant is understood that neither one of us will cross over to do harm to one another, he says, look, I won't cross over, and then if you cross over, you won't do me harm. It's amazing that everything he says is to make Jacob look worse and make him look better. He's trying to save face. And then he says, the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. You think, that sounds good. And this guy's a pagan, remember? He's looking for his household gods. And he said, well, the God of Abraham, the God of Nahor. What God had Abraham been serving before? Same God, same pagan God as Nahor had been serving. They've been pagans, right? Before God called him. And here the man who lives in the pagan land, who's got his pagan God, says, and we'll swear by the God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, the God of their father. The God of Abraham's father that's an idol, that's a false God. The God of Nahor is a false God. The God of Abraham, he used to have false gods, but now he's got the true God. What do you mean? What gods are we swearing by? So Jacob swore, he distinguished, by the fear of his father Isaac. He swore by the true God. Now this is interesting. Isaac had never been an idolater. Isaac never worshipped the gods that Abraham had worshipped before he converted to follow the true God, before this calling. Isaac never had worshipped a false god like this. And Jacob swears by the fear of his father Isaac. And Jacob offered a sacrifice in the hill country and called his kinsmen to eat bread. And they ate bread and spent the night in the hill country. So I just think that the differences in what they swear by is significant. He swears by the fear of his father Isaac. Isaac never served those other gods, and Jacob would not swear by them. God was his God. Right? God had earned that from him, surely, by now. He was coming back in fulfillment, right? God kept his end of things. I'm going to come back, and I will establish this shrine for God at Bethel, and I will worship him, and he'll be my God. And then here comes, Laban and says, well, let's swear this oath to one another by all these gods. And he says, no, by this God. You swear by who you want to swear by, but I'm going to swear by the fear of my father Isaac. What a curious phrase, too. He didn't say the God of my father Isaac, the fear of his father Isaac. To swear by the fear of his father Isaac. The God whom his father feared, whom he loved, who he revered. And then you have this, verse 55, this departure. Well, at the end of 54, they ate bread and spent the night in the hill country. Then early in the morning, Laban arose. What does he do? He's got to finish it out. Kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned home. It's interesting that it skips over Laban's blessing. What did he say when he blessed them? Bless you? I mean, that's not any example we have so far in Genesis of someone giving their fatherly blessing, but the Bible is just not interested in whatever blessing Laban has to offer. Like the only blessing that Jacob ever got when he was with Laban was the blessings that God gave him in spite of Laban. Laban's not the benefactor here. However, he might try to position himself and set things up so that, everybody knows how great Laban was. He went out there, he was going to, by rights, he could have killed all these people, but their God came and told him not to, and so he didn't, and instead of taking everything back, he gave a great gift. Good old Laban. Everyone who's had business dealings with Laban knows better, but Laban's self-deceived enough to just believe it. And so then he ends with this, this departure. No myrrh, no song and dance, though, like he said he was going to do. Just a kiss and a goodbye and a blessing. Now, just to by way of kind of some lessons we can draw here, just some application to make. I have 4 things to say. The first one is immediately applicable to all of us, every believer, and to you kids too who are maybe thinking about, am I going to follow God? Is this going to be my life? Am I going to follow the Lord? There's a lot of maybe scary things out in the world. I'll just say this. In obeying God, we can be confident of his protection and his love. Like when you obey God, you can be very confident of his protection and his love. Here, Jacob goes out. He even messed up the way he obeyed God, but he didn't do it well. He could have done better. And then Moses isn't shy about that. There's some things he shouldn't have done. But he was obeying God. And when the consequences came upon him, partly for things he had not done, and partly for things he had done, he had left in a way that wasn't best. God protected him, right? Even from his mistakes, like God absolutely protected him. He was in the path of obedience, but he had sinned some in that path. He was trying to obey, but he didn't take things into account. He had wronged Jacob in ways that Laban in ways that he shouldn't have. He stole his heart away by not giving him a chance to say goodbye. He shouldn't have done that. But God still protected him because God promised him he'd be with him. And it's this way too, like for the believer. I mean, God commands you to do something, like go do it. You say, well, yeah, but this wasn't good. I did this, it was wrong. I shouldn't. Just go obey God with all your heart. He'll take care of it. Like, don't worry about these things. God will protect you if you're obeying him. He's not thinking that you're going to obey him perfectly. Like he understands that. Right? He's not winking at sin. He doesn't think it's not serious. He's not just okay with it. But he doesn't expect, he's not surprised when we fail. Right? He doesn't call us to run the race until we stumble and then quit. Right? Just go. Keep going. Right? The righteous man falls 7 times and he gets back up every time. Keep going hard. So that's one thing. Just we can be confident of God's protection and of his love in the course of obedience. It had been a different thing if Jacob said, I'm not going. This whole story would have been written differently. He might have lost everything. But that's not what happened. He left. He didn't do it perfectly, but he left. And God protected him because God told him he'd be with him. What else? When I think of Rachel having stolen these idols and having I mean, there are men in Israel who say whatever comes out of the tent is going to be sacrificed. And their daughter comes out. Right? Remember? And, we differ on how to understand that. Right? Some people say she was kept as a virgin, all these, she's not allowed to marry. Other people say that, no, he offered her as a sacrifice. And I'm not here to say which way, he meant that or whatever. But whatever that vow was, he had to keep it. It mattered. And here Jacob says, if anybody's got anything that's yours, they've taken these gods, then they'll answer for it. They'll have to die. And it's his loving wife, his loved wife, beloved wife. She's not found out. She lies about it, right? She continues to cover up. She doesn't confess. She doesn't anything. She hides it. She does everything she can to not be caught. And she gets away with it. Now we could ask, is God approving of her stealing of the idols? Well, no. Is God approving of her lying? Is God winking at it? No. Why is she not found out? I would say, I think this is a clear example to me, as I look at it, of sometimes the benefit of God's protection comes to people who are near God's people, right? Paul talks about this, right, in a family, right? Like if there's a believer in that family, right? Let's say it's a believing mother and her husband's an unbeliever. He's got a job and he's like, God's promises to her are not conditioned upon what the man does. Like he's going to look after her regardless. And so that man and those children will receive some benefit from God's taking care of her. Right? They just do. And I just see like if God is set out to vindicate Jacob. And so Rachel doesn't get caught. Because if Rachel's caught, Jacob can't be vindicated. Like they did steal. Like it's kind of a wash. God means to vindicate his man. Now Jacob isn't getting away with anything Jacob didn't know about. Jacob is innocent. And God maintains his innocence in this whole situation. That's how I read it. So I see this as an example of this, what we know to be true from the New Testament, that God sometimes protects and blesses and gives benefits to people who are not his people because they are near his people, or they are under the protection, the provision, and the care of his people, right? So this is, I think, an example of that. You may read it differently. Regardless, we know what the New Testament says on this. That's clear. That's a reality. I think this is an example of it. One lesson we can draw from this is you see the way Rachel got away with it. And how do you explain that? She shouldn't have. She should have been found out. I mean, they're going back and forth in this kind of judicial case between the two of them, and they're seeking to arrive at truth, and there's one glaring thing that's not revealed. Why? And I think it's because God means to vindicate Jacob in front of Laban and in front of all of Laban's family. And Jacob himself was, in fact, innocent. So what else? Third thing of application is just to say this. Idols are nothing, right? Idols are nothing. The celebrated, revered, vaunted, terrifying gods of the nations are a sham and a vain thing. Rachel is here in the way of women, and she's defiling these idols. She's sitting on these idols, right? Maybe she's lied about the whole thing and she's just claiming to be, or maybe she really was. But this is not a good picture for the idols. And this was, you could imagine kind of the joking and jesting that would have gone on by the average Israelite when he thought about where these idols were in this story and what was happening to the idols. It's just like, that's exactly what the idols deserve. So let me just read one text for all of us, but I think particularly of some of the kids who certainly wouldn't be familiar with it, and it would be a good passage to remember. The kind of the go-to text in the Bible, I think, about idols is Isaiah 44. I'll just read verses 9 through 20. All who fashion idols are nothing, and the things they delight in do not profit. Their witnesses neither see nor know, that they may be put to shame. Who fashions a god or casts an idol that is profitable for nothing? Behold, all his companions shall be put to shame. So if you're the kind of guy you make this idol and it doesn't profit you anything, all of your companions will be put to shame, and the craftsmen are only human. Let them all assemble. So let them all stand forth. They shall be terrified. They shall be put to shame together. So he's going to call them to account, all you idol makers. The ironsmith takes a cutting tool and works it over the coals. He fashions it with hammers and works it with his strong arm, and he gets hungry. And his strength fails because he's weak, right? He drinks no water and he's faint, he's tired. The carpenter stretches a line, he marks it out with a pencil, he shapes it with planes or with knives, and marks it with a compass. He shapes it into the figure of a man with the beauty of a man, and he wants that thing to dwell in his house. This is a household god. He's carved out this image, kind of looks like a man, and he's made it, and he sets it in there. He cuts down cedars, or he chooses a cypress tree or an oak and lets it grow strong among the trees of the forest. He plants a cedar, and the rain nourishes it, and then it becomes fuel for a man, right? He takes a part of it and chops it up and warms himself. He kindles a fire, and he bakes bread, and also he makes a god and worships it. This is staggering. He makes it an idol and falls down before it. Half of it, he took the tree, half of it he burned in the fire, right? Over the half he eats meat, and he roasts it and is satisfied. Also he warms himself and says, "Aha, I'm warm, I've seen the fire." And the rest of it he makes into a god, his idol, and falls down to it and worships it and prays to it and says, "Deliver me, for you are my God." They know not, nor do they discern. For God, that is, He has shut their eyes so that they cannot see, and their hearts so that they cannot understand. No one considers, these people that are doing this, they don't even stop to think, wait a minute, I made this metal idol out of my own strength, like it was nothing. Or I made this wooden idol, I carved it, all this. Or I took this tree and cut it down and I just burned it and consumed it and used it to help me. And the rest of it I'm worshiping as somehow above me and greater than me. This is ridiculous. Just nobody has knowledge, they don't consider this, nor is there knowledge or discernment to say, wait a minute, half of it I burned in the fire, and I also baked bread on its coals, and I roasted meat and have eaten. Should I make the rest of it an abomination? Shall I fall down before a block of wood? He feeds on ashes. A deluded heart has led him astray, and he cannot deliver himself or say, "Is there not a lie in my right hand?" He should be able to say that. This seems obvious, right? I mean, I've got kids that they make art projects and craft projects, and they don't bow down and worship them. This is ridiculous. But such is the superstition of man, right? When you deny God, you're left to invent idols. And this is what happens. Idols are nothing. And then last, just to say, there's just one true God, and He's our God, right? Just one. I mean, there was a clash of personalities there at the hills of Gilead. But there was also a clash of competing gods, right? And the gods of Laban were being bled upon in the tent of Rachel, hidden, stolen from him, he couldn't find. And what good were they to him? Nothing. The God of Jacob stopped a man out for blood, warned him, rebuked him, and preserved and protected Jacob and all of his kindred. And for the 20 years before had been building up his house. There's just no competition. There's no comparison. There's just one God. And He's our God. And very quickly I'll read 3 passages. I may comment on them, but I think I'll just read them. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 39. Know therefore today, and lay it to your heart, that the Lord is God in heaven above and on earth beneath. There is no other. Then Exodus 15:11. Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you? Majestic in holiness, awesome in glorious deeds, doing wonders. Right? Who's like Him? And then the last one, Psalm 48, verse 14. We'll close with this. Psalm 48:14. That this is God, our God forever and ever. He will guide us forever. Right? There's one God. He has delivered us. Nobody's like him. He's with us. He will deliver us forever. These are good, important truths for us as believers. We could go on and on talking about these very things in terms of some of the promises in the New Testament. I don't mean to do that now. So just those four general applications. One, in obeying God, we can be very confident of His protection and of His love. Jacob had it. Secondly, sometimes people that are near the people of God benefit from the association that God has with His own people, right? You can be near, you can be a friend, a relative, a worker, right, and get benefit. That's a real thing. It's not enough. We want more benefit for you than that, right? But it is a benefit. Third, idols are nothing. And fourth, there's one true God, and He is our God. He's the God revealed in Scripture. Well, are there questions or comments on this section?